The moment my sister said it, the room felt like it exploded. "All 15 rentals are mine," she said loudly, like she had practiced it over and over in front of a mirror. She sounded very proud and confident, like she had already won a trophy for it. But she was wrong. She didn't get anything. She had no right to claim them. People actually clapped for her. I watched my aunt smile. I watched my cousins nod. I watched my parents stay quiet. And in that quiet, I could feel them choosing her over me. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I just smiled slowly like I had a secret that nobody could guess. Then I turned my eyes toward my dad. "Dad," I said, my voice calm, even though my chest felt like it was on fire. "You really don't know, do you?" The clapping stopped as if someone had turned off all the lights. My dad froze. His face turned pale, like someone had poured ice water over him. My sister spun around toward me, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, what?" she shouted, her confident voice cracking for a second. That's when I realized something nobody had thought about. They thought this meeting was about who deserved the houses. I knew it was about who legally owned them, not who seemed responsible, not who everyone liked more, who actually had the papers that said the houses were theirs. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? The meeting was in my parents' formal dining room. It always smelled like old wood and polished silver. This room was special. Big family moments happened here. Birthdays, holidays, serious talks, and decisions that could change lives. Decisions that were usually made without asking everyone involved. I arrived a few minutes late on purpose. I wanted to see them settle in, see their faces full of certainty before I stepped in. When I walked inside, every chair was taken except one at the far end of the table. My sister sat near the head, right next to my dad. She looked relaxed, confident, like she belonged there more than anyone else in the world. A big leather folder was neatly in front of her, straight with the edge of the table, looking important. My mom stood behind her chair, one hand resting on the back of it, the other lightly touching my sister's shoulder. She didn't need to say anything. The message was loud and clear. This was her moment. I quietly took my seat. No one said hello. No one asked how I had been. I was invisible until this moment, and even now, they didn't really see me. My uncle cleared his throat. "Well," he said, like he was opening a meeting at work, "we're all here. Let's talk about the properties." My sister didn't wait for anyone. She started talking smoothly, like a rehearsed speech. "I've been managing the rentals for years," she said. "I deal with tenants, repairs, late payments, city inspections, all of it. 15 rental properties across 3 cities. That's not something you give to someone who doesn't understand the work." Several heads nodded. My aunt smiled, pleased. "She's right. She's always been responsible," my aunt said. My sister glanced at me briefly, then back at the others. "And Vespera," she said slowly, like explaining something to a child, "has never shown real interest in the rentals. She has her own life, her own desk job. Nothing wrong with that, but this," she waved her hand toward the table, "isn't her world." Someone laughed softly. My cousin leaned forward. "Honestly, what would Vespera even do with 15 rentals?" My sister jumped on the question quickly. "She's always sensitive, detail-oriented. Not exactly built for this kind of responsibility," she said, her voice calm but sharp. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. I looked at my dad, hoping, maybe foolishly, that he would speak up, correct her, or at least remember all the years I quietly handled things no one else wanted. But he didn't meet my eyes. Finally, my mom spoke. Her voice was gentle, like soft music, the way she always sounds when she wants to smooth over something without actually changing anything. "We just want what's best for the family," she said. "Not for me. For my sister." My sister straightened in her chair, seeing that the room was completely on her side now. "So let's not waste time," she said firmly. "I've already spoken with the accountant. It's cleanest this way." She turned toward me, polite but cold. "All 15 rentals are mine. Vespera gets nothing." The words landed heavily, but the room stayed quiet. They weren't shocked. They weren't upset. To them, this wasn't cruelty. It was just the easiest, most efficient way to handle it. My sister leaned back in her chair, satisfied, like she had just closed the biggest deal of her life. She watched me closely, waiting for some reaction. Anger, tears, an outburst. Anything she could use to prove me wrong. I felt all the eyes on me. My hands rested calmly in my lap. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't defend myself. I lifted my head slowly and met her gaze. "Go on," I said, my voice calm. "I'm listening." Her lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. She thought my silence meant I accepted it. What she didn't understand, what none of them had realized yet, was that I had been paying attention for years. I had been listening. I had been learning. And I hadn't come unprepared. They continued talking. That was the strange part. Once my sister made her declaration, the conversation shifted, as if my future had already been erased. Plates were nudged aside. Someone poured more water. My aunt asked if the accountant should be looped in to finalize things. I sat there, breathing slowly, listening. For years, that had been my role in this family, present but optional, seen but never considered. It was almost comforting how predictable they were. My sister crossed her legs and leaned toward my father. "I'll need access to the remaining files," she said casually. "Some older records are still scattered." My father nodded. "Whatever you need," he said with no hesitation, his voice calm. My sister smiled, encouraged me. "I'll also need the spare keys. Some tenants are overdue, and I want to make sure everything's handled efficiently." "Efficiently?" I asked quietly. "You mean the tenants on Maple Street?" The table went silent again, but this time the silence felt different. My sister turned toward me, surprised. "What about them?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, shrugging slightly. "Just thought you might want to be specific." She stared at me for a long second, then recovered quickly. "I manage all of them, Vespera. You wouldn't understand the details." That was her favorite line. I nodded, pretending to accept her explanation, but my mind was replaying memories she didn't know. Late-night emails from tenants she claimed didn't exist. Invoices that never matched the work described. Deposits that disappeared for weeks before showing up again. I had noticed. I had always noticed. My uncle chuckled awkwardly. "Vespera's always been observant. Maybe she should have gone into accounting or surveillance," he joked. Laughter followed. I smiled politely, even though my stomach felt tight. My sister leaned closer to me, lowering her voice. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We can keep things simple." "Simple for who?" I asked quietly. Her eyes hardened. "For everyone," she said. That was the difference between us. She believed everyone meant the people with the loudest voices. I believed everyone meant the people affected by the truth. My mother cleared her throat. "Vespera, sweetheart, if something is bothering you, you should say it now." I looked at her, really looked at her. All those years she had told me to be patient, to keep the peace, to not rock the boat. I took a deep breath. "I'm not bothered," I said calmly. "I'm just trying to understand how we reached this conclusion." My sister scoffed. "It's obvious," she said. "Is it?" I asked. She straightened in her chair. "Yes. Grandpa left the properties to Dad. Dad let me manage them. I've done the work. End of story." She said it with certainty, like saying something over and over could make it true. I turned to my father. "Is that what you believe?" I asked gently. He hesitated. Just a moment. But that little pause spread through the room like a cold draft. My aunt shifted. My uncle frowned slightly. My sister noticed, her jaw tightening, her foot tapping once against the floor. "Dad," she said sharply. "You know this," she said. He nodded, but his voice was softer now. "That's how I understood it." "Yes. Understood. Not confirmed. Not verified." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands again. "Okay," I said quietly. My sister exhaled in relief, mistaking my response for retreat. "Good," she said. "Then we're done here." She looked around the table, already moving on. What she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that the more they spoke, the clearer it became. They weren't lying. They were assuming. And assumptions can break easily. I looked down at my bag resting beside my chair. Inside were all the documents they hadn't asked to see. I didn't reach for it yet. Not because I was afraid, but because timing matters. The moment they felt most certain, that's when the truth would hit hardest. My sister was already gathering her folder when I spoke again. "Dad," I said. My voice wasn't loud. "Can I ask you something?" My sister let out a sharp breath. "Vespera, we've already just one question," she said, holding up a finger. I didn't look at her. "Please." The room went quiet in that uncomfortable way it does when people sense something is about to change, but don't yet know how. My father nodded slowly. "All right." I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on the table. "Did Grandpa ever tell you he transferred the rental properties before he died?" I asked. The air seemed to thicken. My father blinked. My sister laughed immediately. "Too fast, too loud." "That's ridiculous," she said. "Everything went through the estate. You know that." I didn't look at her. "I'm asking, Dad," I said. My father frowned, his confusion deepening. "I trusted your sister with the paperwork, he said softly. She handled all of that. My sister's smile stiffened. That's because you asked me to, she said quickly. Someone had to be responsible. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. And when you say paperwork, I continued, turning back to my father, do you mean copies of the deeds or just summaries? My aunt leaned forward now. Why does that matter? She asked. Because, I said, keeping my voice even, summaries aren't ownership. My sister moved her chair back just a little bit, only an inch, but it made a soft scraping sound on the floor. You're making this more complicated than it is, she snapped. Grandpa wouldn't do something like that without telling us. I looked at her carefully. You mean without telling you? I asked. Her eyes flashed. What do you mean by that? She demanded. I said slowly. Grandpa and I talked more than you think. That hit harder than I expected. My mom stiffened in her chair, her hand moving to cover her mouth, as if she were trying to stop herself from saying something she shouldn't. Vespera, why didn't you ever tell us? She asked softly, her voice shaking a little. I held her gaze and said clearly, because no one ever asked. There was silence. Not the comfortable, quiet kind you can fill with small talk. This was a heavy, serious kind of silence. The kind that made your chest feel tight and your throat dry. My sister crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her face hard. You're hinting at something, she said. If you have something to say, just say it. Stop pretending. I took a deep breath. I'm saying that we don't all have the same information, I said, keeping my voice calm but strong. My dad rubbed his temple, clearly trying to think through what I had just said. Vespera, are you saying that the houses aren't part of the estate? I'm saying, I answered carefully, that Grandpa settled some things while he was still alive. He made sure certain decisions were done the right way, quietly, without causing fights. My sister jumped up suddenly. This is insane. You're confused, or worse, you're trying to cause problems. I didn't move. I stayed calm, steady. I'm trying to prevent problems, I said quietly. She stared at me, searching my face for hesitation, for fear, for something she could use against me. She didn't find it. My uncle finally spoke. If that's true, he said slowly, then we should probably check. Just to be sure. Celine spun toward him, her face twisting in anger. There's nothing to check. You're wasting time. I reached down and put my hand on my bag. For the first time that afternoon, I felt the room shift. Not toward me, but away from her. I agree, I said softly. We should check. My sister's voice got louder. Check what? She demanded. I looked at her calmly and gave a small, steady smile. Not the polite smile I had given earlier, but a quiet, calm one. The records, I said. My dad swallowed hard. Vespera, he asked softly. What exactly do you have? I didn't answer him right away. I knew that if I spoke, there would be no pretending that this was just a misunderstanding. I let the silence stretch, letting everyone feel it. Then I said just enough to make them stop guessing. For the first time that afternoon, my sister looked afraid. I didn't rush. That was the mistake they kept expecting me to make. To panic, to hurry, to let my emotions get the better of me. I stayed calm. I slowly opened my bag, letting the sound of the zipper fill the room. Every eye followed the movement, as if whatever I was about to pull out could hit someone physically. I took out my phone first and placed it on the table, face down. Then I slid a thin, plain folder forward. It was unmarked and simple, nothing like the thick, fancy binder my sister had brought to show her authority. Mr. Darien, I said, turning to our family lawyer, could you pull up the county property records? My sister laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that made my ears hurt. This is a waste of time, she said. Mr. Darien hesitated. He glanced at my dad, then at my sister, then back at me. Just the public records, I added calmly. Nothing private, nothing guessed or assumed. Just the real official records. My dad nodded slowly. Go ahead. The laptop opened. The projector hummed softly as the screen came to life. I read the first address out loud. Mr. Darien typed, clicked, paused, and then read carefully. Owner. Ella Grace Whitmore. The room went quiet, as if everyone had taken a deep breath at the same time. My mom covered her mouth with her hand. That can't be right, she whispered. It is, Mr. Darien said, eyes fixed on the screen. The record was from March 12, 2018. My sister stepped closer to the table. Pull the deed, she demanded. You're reading it wrong. Mr. Darien pulled up the document. It was notarized, stamped, and signed by my grandfather. My name was printed beneath his signature. Clear and undeniable. That's one, I said quietly. The second address? Same result. Third. Fourth, 15 times in a row. Same truth every time. No one spoke. The only sound was my sister's fast, heavy breathing. She sounded like she was running, even though she wasn't moving. My dad sank back in his chair. You've owned them, he whispered, staring at the screen. This whole time? Yes, I said. Grandpa had transferred the properties to me while he still could. My sister shook her head violently. No, I handled everything. I would have known. I looked at her. You handled the management, I said calmly, not the ownership. That's impossible, she snapped. Why would he do that? Because he didn't trust appearances, I said. He trusted records. He wanted the truth to be clear and proven, not just assumed. My mom's voice trembled. Why didn't he tell us? He told me, I said. And he told me why. The words hung there, heavy and serious. Mr. Darien cleared his throat. These transfers are legally valid, he said. They were done over a year before Mr. Whitmore passed away. My sister looked at my dad, panicked. Dad, say something. He couldn't. He was still staring at the screen, at the proof he had never asked to see. I nodded slowly. That was exactly what Grandpa had feared. My sister took a step back from the table, her confidence slipping with every movement. You're twisting this, she said. You always twist things. No, I replied calmly. I'm reading the facts for the first time, just like everyone else. The power in the room had shifted. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded anything, but because facts don't need shouting. They stand on their own. My sister looked around, trying to find support. No one met her eyes. She turned back to me, her voice cracking. So what are you saying? I met her gaze steadily. I'm saying, I said, this meeting isn't about who deserves the rentals. It's about who actually owns them. For a long moment, no one moved. The story our family had believed for years collapsed. The proof was still glowing on the screen. 15 addresses, 15 confirmations, 15 quiet reminders that my sister had been wrong. Celine was the first to break. You planned this, she said sharply. You let me talk. You let me embarrass myself. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. You did that on your own. She turned to my dad, panic in her eyes. Dad, you know I took care of everything. I protected this family. You managed what you were allowed to manage. That's not the same thing, I said. My mom stepped forward, her hands shaking. Vespera, please, she said softly. We don't need to tear each other apart. I felt something tighten inside me. I didn't bring the truth into this room, I said. It's already here. Celine laughed, hollow and sharp. Oh, come on. You expect us to believe Grandpa secretly signed everything over to you and no one noticed. He noticed, I said. He just didn't announce it. I opened the plain folder from my bag. Inside was a thick stack of papers, neat and organized, tabs marking different sections. For the last 5 years, I said, I have been reviewing the rental accounts quietly. Celine's eyes got wide. You had no right, she said. I had every right, I said calmly. I was the owner. I slid the folder toward Mr. Darien. Forensic summaries, I said. Every rent payment, every expense, every gap, every missing or wrong detail. My uncle leaned forward, curious. What kind of gaps? He asked. I looked at him. Missing deposits, fake repair bills, vendors that don't exist, I said. Celine slammed her hand on the table. That's a lie. It's documented, I said. And verified. Mr. Darien flipped through the pages, frowning more with every turn. These are discrepancies, he said quietly. How much? My dad asked, horrified. I swallowed. $243,900. The number hung in the air like smoke. My mom staggered back into her chair. That can't be right, she whispered. Celine shook her head violently. You're twisting numbers. That's not theft. That's miscommunication. Miscommunication doesn't make fake invoices, I said. Or cash payments that never reached the account. Her eyes blazed. You stayed quiet on purpose. You wanted me to fail. I stood tall. I stayed quiet because Grandpa told me to. He said if I spoke too soon, the truth would get lost under excuses. My dad looked up sharply. He warned you about Celine. Yes, I said. About anyone who confuses access with ownership. Celine's voice cracked. You let me keep managing everything? You insisted, I said. I documented everything carefully. She stared, disbelief changing to raw fear. So what? She demanded. You're going to sue your own sister? I held her gaze. I'm going to protect what's mine, I said. And make sure people are responsible for what they do. My mom reached for my arm. I gently pulled away. Doesn't the family do this? I said. Family also doesn't decide someone's worth without asking. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. My attorney's filing, I said. It goes on Monday. Celine collapsed into her chair, drained. Her confidence, her certainty, the story she had built for years, all of it had folded in on itself. For a long while no one spoke. The projector still glowed behind us, showing the proof of everything. My dad finally leaned back in his chair, looking exhausted. My mom buried her face in her hands. My uncle shook his head slowly, still processing everything. I felt calm. Not triumphant, not angry. Just calm. Grandpa had trusted me with the truth, and now it was done correctly, carefully, and fairly. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't demanded, I hadn't lost my patience. I had only shown the truth. And sometimes the truth is stronger than any argument, stronger than any shouting, stronger than fear. The room felt heavy, quiet, and still. Celine sat there, stunned, realizing that nothing she said could change what was on the screen. It was done. It was real. The room felt smaller now and heavier. No one clapped. No one cheered. This wasn't a happy moment. It wasn't a celebration. It was serious. It was a moment where everyone had to face what they had done. As I looked around the table at the people who had once made decisions about me without asking me, I realized something very important. The meeting wasn't about the houses anymore. It was about facing the results of their choices. And for the first time, they couldn't run away from it. They couldn't hide. I didn't wait for anyone to say another word. There was nothing left to argue about. Nothing left to explain. Everything that mattered was already there on the screen and in the folder I had brought. Staying in the room would only let them try to talk me out of what I had decided. I was done with that. I packed my bag and stood up. Vespera, my dad said quietly. His voice sounded shaky, almost like he was scared. Let's slow down. We can talk about this. We've been talking for years. I looked at him and said, this is the first time we're actually doing something. Celine, my sister, looked up at me. Her face was pale, and her confidence was gone. She didn't look like the strong, loud person she always tried to be. You can't just walk away, she said. This affects all of us. I answered calmly. That's exactly why I'm walking away. I left the dining room without looking back. I didn't need to. By Monday morning, the papers had been submitted. I sat in my lawyer's office with my hands flat on the desk as the clerk stamped the documents. The sound was small and quiet, almost like a little click, but it felt huge to me. It felt like drawing a line through 5 years of silence. Done. By Tuesday, 2 investigators contacted me. They wanted to meet and ask questions. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, my folder open in front of us. The pages were spread out like a map, showing all the choices that had been made without asking me. They asked questions carefully. I answered slowly and clearly, the way I had learned to do when facts were more important than feelings. Nobody yelled. Nobody accused me of anything. They just wrote things down and listened. That night, my phone kept buzzing. Celine called many times. Then she sent message after message. I didn't realize. I thought everything was approved. I can fix this. I read all the messages, but I didn't answer any of them. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt calm. An hour later, she left a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. Vespera, please. I'll pay it back. I never meant for this to happen. I listened once, then deleted it. I didn't need to hear it again. I typed one message and sent it. Turn over the keys within 48 hours. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. By Thursday, I had already called a locksmith. Standing outside the first house, holding the keys in my hand, I didn't feel like I had won. I didn't feel like shouting or cheering. I felt calm, steady, and real. The building looked normal. Old paint on the walls, little chips, a child's bike leaning against the fence. This was what everyone had been fighting about. Not power, not control, but responsibility. When the locks clicked, the sound felt louder in my chest than on the door. For the first time, the houses were really mine, not just on paper. They belonged to me, and I could take care of them properly. That evening, I sent letters and emails to the people living in the houses and the workers who helped with them. I introduced myself as the owner. I wrote politely, clearly, and carefully. No drama. No anger. Just clear instructions so everyone would know what was happening. When I closed my laptop, I felt tired, but underneath the tiredness was something new. Relief. Finally, the system was working, and it was finally working for me. My dad came to my apartment that Saturday. He came all by himself. No warning, no phone call, just a knock on the door. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure if he should be there. I opened the door. He stood in the hallway, hands clasped together, shoulders low, looking smaller and older. Not like the man who used to command everyone in a room, but someone who had realized too late what he had missed. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. We sat at opposite ends of the couch. The space between us felt heavy with years of things left unsaid. He stared at his hands for a long time before speaking. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I waited. I thought about it." He kept talking, swallowing hard. He had let Celine handle everything because she was loud, confident, and always wanting control. "And you?" he asked, voice soft. I didn't answer, so I finished his thought for him. He nodded, a little ashamed. "I took that for comfort," he said. "Comfort that everything was okay. I got the documents from my desk, copies of deeds, timelines, and records that had been in my life for a long time. I handed them to him. You could have known," I said gently. "All of this was public. You just didn't look." His hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "He trusted you," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "But he also trusted you to ask questions." Tears came to his eyes. When he looked at me, they fell down his cheeks. "I didn't see you," he said. "Not really." "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I spent years thinking I wasn't enough. That if I spoke louder or tried harder, you would notice me." He shook his head, voice breaking. "You were always enough. I just wasn't paying attention." We sat quietly. Not tense, not angry. Just quiet because nothing more needed defending. He reached for my hand carefully, like he wasn't sure I would let him. "I did. I'm proud of you," he said finally. "Not because of the houses, but because you stood up for yourself." I believed him. Not because the words were perfect, but because it was hard for him to say. When he left, the apartment felt lighter. Not fixed, but honest. I realized that even a late apology can still change a wound, make it feel smaller. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my laptop. I wrote emails slowly and carefully. Letters to tenants, notices to workers, confirmations to the bank. Nothing dramatic, nothing personal. Just clear words. For the first time, my name didn't feel like something I had to defend. It was simply mine. Over the next few days, answers came back. Tenants thanked me for explaining everything clearly. One woman said she was glad to finally know who to call when something broke. Another said, "My grandfather had talked about me once many years ago." I closed my eyes and let that feeling sit with me. I felt proud. The houses weren't trophies. They weren't things to fight over. They were responsibilities. They were places where people lived ordinary, fragile, important lives. That was the part everyone else had missed. Celine stopped calling. I didn't know what she would face because of her actions, and I didn't try to control that. I had learned something important. Accountability didn't need cruelty or anger. It needed boundaries. What surprised me most was how calm I felt. Not happy, not like I had won, not triumphant. Just steady. One evening, as I locked up my office and stepped outside into the cool air, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't comparing myself to my sister anymore. I wasn't comparing myself to my parents. I wasn't measuring myself by anyone else's expectations. I had protected what was mine. I had told the truth when it mattered. I had done it without becoming someone I didn't know. That was the real gift my grandfather had left me. Not the houses themselves, but patience to watch. Courage to speak. Wisdom to know when being quiet was preparing for something, and when it was time to finally be heard. That night I slept deeply. No thinking about what I would say to anyone, no guarding my name, no rehearsing conversations. Just rest. And in the morning, I woke up knowing this. I hadn't taken anything from my family. I had claimed myself. I stood up. I had been seen. And that was more important than anything else. From that day on, I felt different. Every time I opened a door to one of the houses, I remembered that I was responsible for the people inside. Their lives were ordinary, fragile, and important. And I would treat them with care, just like they deserved. I felt strong, but not in a loud or angry way. I felt steady, like I could handle whatever came next. I wasn't a background character in my own life anymore. I was the person in charge, not because I wanted power, but because I wanted to do what was right. And finally, after all these years, I could breathe. I could rest. I could finally be me.